The readable band had been empty for 19 months, and then in the space of one watch, it was not empty anywhere. Soren Kade had spent 4 years learning that the deep ones came up once a decade if you were lucky and patient and willing to lose, and he was staring at a board that said a fragment of the halo was rising into the readable band over Vale, and another over a giant 11 light-years away, and another, faster than the relay could log them. Every gas giant the Reach had ever hung a station over, all of them at once. He had the ears on before he was fully awake, the battered analog cans over his head with the signal-taped band, because he listened with his hands and his ears first and the screen second. The lantern hung in the bright seam of Vale's upper atmosphere, a buoyant can of a station that had logged exactly one usable EU contact in its whole history, the one Soren had made 18 months ago by accident, by reversing a drop probe and sending a rising fragment its own pattern back instead of one of the Soul catalog's polite transactional questions. That contact had saved the lantern's lease. The notice that had been pulling them off station got quietly reversed 3 months later when the recording finally reached a desk that mattered. Some authority inquiry with a number, 774 Omega, that had been swallowing frontier oddities and would not let them go. Soren had gone from the man about to lose the only job where listening was the point to the man the inquiry called when a gas giant did something it was not supposed to do. It had never done this.
Tell me that's a sensor fault.
Nadia Brandt said, coming onto the deck still pulling her jumpsuit straight, reading glasses pushed up in her gray-streaked hair.
It's not a sensor fault. Vale's got a fragment up. So does every giant on the lease grid that's still got a station to hear it. Simultaneous. All of them.
That doesn't happen.
I know it doesn't happen. It's happening.
He pulled one ear cup off the way he did when he needed to think instead of hear, and made himself say the thing he had been circling since the board woke him.
They're all doing the same thing at the same time, Nadia. The deep ones don't coordinate. They've never coordinated. Something told all of them at once, and it told them with something faster than light and older than the Accord, and the only thing on this frontier that's been doing anything new lately is the clock that Inquiry won't shut up about. The one that's slowing down.
Nadia was quiet for a moment, the dry, weathered quiet of someone who had run out of better options before.
You think the deep ones heard the clock change?
I think the deep ones have been listening to that clock since before there was a galaxy to listen in, and it just did something it has never done in front of them. And they all sat up at once.
The relay chimed a priority overlay. The Inquiry, awake somewhere out in the dark and watching the same grid he was. A contractor's voice, dry and quick and academic, a xeno-linguist the Inquiry had attached to the file. Anand, the one who had built the composite that started the whole funded mess.
Lantern, this is 774 Omega. We are seeing simultaneous emergence across the whole contact grid. You are the only contact asset on the file who has ever gotten one of them to answer. We need to know if they are responding to the deep timing, and we need it recorded, because nobody up the chain will believe it without a recording.
Then stop talking and hold my relay open, because I'm about to do something the catalog says is impossible 100 times, and I need the whole grid to do it with me.
He looked at the cascade of telltales. 100 rising fragments across 100 gas giants, each one a Lantern-class station's lonely once-a-decade event, all of them at once, and every one of them about to get the same thing every Emergence got. A human at a console running the Soul catalog of polite questions and getting nothing, because the catalog only knew how to ask the deep ones for things, and you did not answer a thing this old by asking it for something. The Emergence events lasted hours. Maybe. The one over Vale 18 months ago had lasted until a weather front closed the band, and he had gotten exactly one answer out of it before it went, and that one answer had rewritten his life. He had 100 of them now, and one of him.
I can't talk to 100 gas giants from one station,
he said, mostly to himself. Then he heard what he'd said and stopped, and the restless went out of him the way it did when something was actually happening.
But every one of those giants has a station over it, and every station has somebody at a console right now running the catalog and getting nothing. I don't have to talk to 100 giants. I have to teach 100 people to stop asking and start answering. Tonight. In the next 2 hours.
The catalog was a market. Soren had understood that 18 months ago, and it had been the whole key. The Sul had spent thousands of years building shapes you could drop into a gas giant, and every single shape asked the deep ones for something. Greet, query, request, open. Because the Sul did not build instruments to do things they couldn't sell, and there was no trade in simply saying, I heard you. So the catalog got nothing, year after year, station after station, and everyone decided the deep ones did not answer, when the truth was that nobody had ever said a thing to them that wasn't a sales pitch. You reversed a sensor. That was the trick, the whole stupid, beautiful trick. A drop probe's pressure sensor was a transducer, a diaphragm and a coil, and you could drive it backward and make it a speaker instead of a microphone. And then you could send the deep ones a pressure pattern the closed Sul emitter could never shape. And the thing you sent was not a question. You took the deep one's own rising pattern and you played it back. I heard you, not what are you? And it answered, because in all the thousands of years, you were the first one who had not wanted anything from it. He could not do that 100 times, but it was not complicated. It was just forbidden and unfamiliar, and the kind of thing a junior tech at a half-funded station would never try unless someone talked them through it while their hands shook. That was the whole problem and the whole answer at once. The thing he had discovered was not a piece of hardware. It was a sentence. I heard you instead of what are you? And a sentence could be taught faster than a tool could be built. He did not need to ship anything. He did not need the inquiry's budget or the authority's permission or a decade of revisions to the Sul catalog. He needed 2 hours, an open channel, and 100 people willing to do something their training told them was a waste of a certified probe. The deep ones had not been waiting for better instruments, it turned out. They had been waiting for someone to stop selling and start listening, and there had never been enough of that to go around. Until tonight, when the whole frontier woke up needing to do it at once.
Nadia, I need the relay, the whole relay, every Lantern-class station on the contact grid, open channel right now.
The contact grid relay is rated for status pings and weather. You want to run a live teaching channel to 100 stations through buoys that drop a packet every time someone sneezes.
I want to run it through the comms tender who keeps that relay alive with spit and stubbornness, and I want you to tell the inquiry to lean on her arc to hold for 2 hours.
Nadia looked at him a long moment. Then she pulled the reading glasses down out of her hair and put them on, which was how she said yes.
Log the clause you're breaking.
She said.
And the next 40 after it. I'll wake the grid.
The next 2 hours were the strangest teaching shift of Soren's life. He sat at the console with the ears on and talked 100 strangers through the same dumb miracle, one at a time and then in groups, his voice going out across a comms relay that should not have held and did, because somewhere down the chain, a contractor he had never met was nursing it through every drop and stutter, holding a frontier of buoys in phase by hand, the way she apparently held everything. Find your drop probe, he told them, again and again, system after system. Pull the pressure sensor. It is a transducer. It works both ways. Wire it to emit, not to read. Now stop asking it anything. Take the pattern it is already sending you, the one rising into your band right now, and play it back. Do not change it. Do not improve it. Just send it home. I heard you, that is all. That is the whole sentence. It should have been the easiest thing in the galaxy to say, and it was the hardest because every one of them had been trained the way Soren had been trained, that the catalog was the catalog, that the Sul had spent 10,000 years learning how to speak to the deep ones, and a junior contractor at a leaking station was not going to improve on it with a screwdriver and a hunch. He could hear that training in their voices when they first came back to him. Then he could hear it break. A Chief 2 systems coreward, older than Nadia, a man who had run IU contact leases for 30 years and logged nothing, got on the channel to tell Soren flatly that he would not let his crew cook a certified probe on a theory. Soren did not argue. He had learned that much from watching Nadia. He just asked the man to play the recording out of Vale, 18 months old, the one answer the catalog had never once gotten in all its history, and then to do whatever his conscience told him afterward. 40 minutes later, the man's station lit green on the grid, and he came back on the channel and did not say anything at all, which from a 30-year man was the loudest thing Soren heard all night. A tech on a giant Soren could not have found on a chart drove her diaphragm too hard out of nerves and tore it on the first send. He talked her through pulling a second sensor from a dead weather buoy, while her hands shook so badly he could hear the tools rattle against the deck through her open mic. Slow, he told her. It is not going anywhere. The deep ones have waited 1 billion years. They can wait for you to find a screwdriver. She laughed, wet and startled, and got it wired, and sent the pattern down, and her station went green, and he moved on to the next one before he let himself feel it. Not every station got there in time. A giant out on the rimward edge had a weather front rolling across its readable seam, the same kind of front that had closed Vale's band and ended Soren's first contact 18 months and a lifetime ago. And he listened to a tech out there race it, rig the probe, reverse the sensor, send the pattern, and lose. The band going to murk before any answer could climb back up, the fragment sinking unanswered into the dark for another 10 years. The tech came back on, furious and grieving both, and Soren told him the only true thing he had, that he had done everything right, that the deep ones had heard him even if he would never hear them answer, and that 10 years was not forever to something that counted in billions. It did not help much. Some of the night was just loss. That was the job too. Some of them couldn't. Some of the probes cooked the way his first one had. The diaphragm was never built to be driven hard, and a sensor screamed once and tore and went dead, one good run and gone. He heard a tech 2 systems over swear and go quiet and come back on with a second probe. He heard a woman on a giant whose name he didn't know start crying, softly off-channel, when hers answered. Through all of it, the relay held, which it had no business doing. The contact grid chain was a string of weather buoys older than Soren, rated to pass a status ping and a pressure reading and nothing else. And he was running a live human voice and 100 return channels through it for hours. It dropped and came back. It dropped and came back. Every time it should have died for good, it didn't. And somewhere under the work, Soren understood that there was a person on the far end of that small miracle. A comms tender out at a relay arc he would never see, holding a frontier of failing buoys in phase by hand, relaying the chain faster than it could break. He never heard her voice once. He heard her work in the gaps that closed back up half a second before he lost a station. Whoever she was doing exactly what he was doing, an impossible thing with a junk drawer of tools, for the kind of no reason no sensible person would ever sign off on. He kept his voice level for them, the way Nadia kept hers level for the crew, because 100 people doing a forbidden thing for the first time needed a calm voice more than they needed a brilliant one. He told them it was all right when a probe cooked. He told them to log the claws. He told the woman who was crying that she had just done a thing older species had failed at for 1 billion years, and to please, for the record, keep recording. And one by one, as the deep ones rose into 100 bright bands, the grid lit up with the same impossible telltale. Station after station after station. Contact. Answered. The deep ones who answered no one. Answering everyone. Because 100 strangers had all stopped asking at once and said the same small true thing into the dark. Because they answered everywhere all at once. What rose into the readable band over Vale, while Soren held the grid together, was the largest thing he had ever heard, and he had spent his life listening to nothing. He played the fragment its own rising pattern back, the way he had the first time, and it answered, the way it had the first time. But this time, when he stripped the 2 motifs the catalog could read, the one the Sul glossed, the ones who shaped, the one they glossed kept silence, and listened to what the answer was built on, the carrier underneath, the slow, regular pulse holding the whole structure up. He had heard that pulse before, not from an EU, from the inquiries file, from a relay contractor's recording of a dead zone 1,000 light years from any gas giant. The deep timing, the clock. He took the cans off. He needed them off to think, and he needed them off because what he was hearing had stopped being a sound and become a fact. And a fact that large he could not hold was something pressed against his ears. The deep ones were not just stirring. They were not just answering him. They had reached down past everything a human instrument could read, found the one slow pulse that ran underneath the whole dark. The clock nobody had set and nobody could find, and they were keeping time to it, deliberately in chorus, the way a room full of strangers will fall into step with a drum without any one of them deciding to. And the drum was slowing, and they knew it was slowing. And the only new thing in the whole patient galaxy, the single change in all that depth, was that lately a handful of clumsy, warm-blooded animals at leaking stations had started, for the first time in the history of anything, to say back into it. We hear it too. And it was slowing. The carrier under the EU's answer was beating at exactly the rate the inquiry's clock was beating, and it was slowing at exactly the rate the clock was slowing. And the deep ones were not just keeping that time, they were answering it in unison, across the whole frontier, with the one structure the catalog could half read and the one motif everyone had been afraid of, kept silence. The makers, in a silence that was kept, sung back at a slowing clock by the oldest voices in the galaxy. Soren sat with both hands over the ears, pressing them to his head, and did not move for a long time. He could not translate it. He wanted to be honest with himself about that, in the moment while it was still happening, because the moment you let yourself believe you understood the deep ones was the moment you started lying. He did not know what the answer meant. He did not know if kept silence was a name, a place, a warning, a grief, or a word for the makers themselves. He had spent his life being told the deep ones might remember the predecessors, and he still did not know if this was memory or theory or mythology or a thing they were watching happen right now. But he knew two things, and he would put both in the log, and neither of them was the forbidden sentence. The deep ones knew the clock was slowing, all of them, at once, across the whole frontier, and they had started answering us. The emergence held for 3 hours, longer than any on record, as if the deep ones were in no hurry now that someone had finally said the right thing. Then one by one, across 100 gas giants, the fragments began to sink back into the unreadable depth, the way they always did, on their own time, for reasons no human would ever be told. The readable band over Vale went quiet. The relay, 2 hours past when it should have failed, finally dropped. And somewhere 1,000 light years away, a contractor Soren had never met let a chain of buoys go, and probably swore. Nadia put a cup of something hot down by his hand. He hadn't noticed her go.
You held 100 stations on a relay rated for weather pings,
She said.
and got the deep ones to answer all at once. The inquiry's going to want to know what they said.
I'll tell them what I can prove. They answered. They're keeping the same time as the clock the inquiry's chasing. And they kept it back at us. What it means, I'm not going to write down, because I don't know, and the day I pretend I do is the day I should be fired.
He filed it that way, a report that asserted what it could prove and refused the sentence it could not. The EU emerged simultaneously frontier-wide in response to a change in the deep timing. The structure of the response carries the deep timing's carrier rhythm and tracks its deceleration. The response was elicited by human echo and not by the catalog. The deep ones are answering, and they are answering us. He attached every recording. He did not say what it meant. He had built a whole career on not saying what it meant. The youngest tech on the Lantern's crew, a kid 2 years on station who had spent the whole emergence running probe rigs to Soren's shouted instructions, found him on the deck afterward, hollow-eyed, holding the cup he hadn't drunk.
Soren, 100 of them. All at once, the same thing. What are they saying?
Soren looked at the empty readable band, at the bright quiet seam where 1,000 voices had been an hour ago. He had spent his whole life listening to one fragment a decade. Tonight he had heard the deep ones answer the galaxy's oldest clock in chorus, and he gave the kid the only answer he was sure of.
I think they're doing what I did.
He said.
I think they heard the clock slowing, and they're saying, I heard you, to whatever said it.
He did not say the rest because the rest had no proof and never would, that the makers might still be close enough, somewhere, to hear it answered, or that the saying might be the only funeral the galaxy was ever going to get. 100 ancient voices keeping a slowing clock back at the dark, on the slim chance that anyone was still there to know they had not stopped listening. The kid waited for more. There wasn't any more. After a while, Soren put the ears back on, over the empty band, and listened to the nothing, which was the job, and which had never once in his life felt like nothing again.